What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Second Streamers podcast. My name is Will Baldwin, and with me is Paul Guado, and we're here for the second official episode of the 2019 NFL season, recapping Thursday Night Football last night, and then previewing Week 2, picking every game against the spread. Paul, how's it going?
It's going well. Pretty excited for this one. I mean, Week 2 is an exciting week. We got some good matchups and an interesting game last night to go over, to say the least.
Yeah, last night was a fun one. It was kind of what Week 2 is all about, 2 0-1 teams, and starting off 0-2 really hurts. I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 80% of the time you miss the playoffs if you start off 0-2. So it's pretty crazy that in this league, your second game of the year can almost define what your season's going to be, but that's why we love it. So, Paul, last night, Panthers-Bucks. I think the takeaway from this game is I think Cam Newton's done.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, to be honest with you. It was not a good look for the Panthers. I mean, they just didn't look like a good football team out there. Jameis Winston outshined Cam Newton, which, I don't know, some people would say should not happen. I mean, Cam Newton has had a great career. He's been so dominant in the past. I mean, his Super Bowl run,
League MVP,
but sorry, but. Oh my goodness. Got a little bit of a cold today. But, I mean, going 24 for 50, that's not a good look on him. No touchdowns in the game. The kicker went off. And they got a safety on D, but Tampa Bay really dominated the game as a whole. I mean, there's nothing that you can say about it. Cam Newton, I think, is done. Well, I wouldn't say he's done. I think he still has some gas in the tank. I think he could go a couple more years of being a mediocre quarterback with signs of greatness like he used to have. But I think he's pretty close. He's knocking on the door, you know?
So I think the biggest question from this game, Paul, is which horrendous airmail pass was your favorite of Cam's? Because
there are so many. Too many to choose from.
I think for me it was the challenged pass interference where he threw it about 14 yards over Curtis Samuel's head, they for some reason wasted a challenge and a timeout on that when it was like pretty clear that was not a catchable ball.
Yeah, he looked awful all night. None of his passes really looked on point, which was upsetting to say the least. I always cheer for Cam. I've always liked him since he was in the league. He was one of the first players I started following in college when he was at Auburn, and he was just going off. So I liked him, and I cheered for him in the Super Bowl, and he lost that. And I mean, last night was ugly for him. So
it's always tough when Jameis Winston outplays you at home. That's not a good look. But in all seriousness, I think the takeaway for the Bucks, even like Jameis was fine. Like maybe the takeaway is Jameis can be a fine NFL quarterback, but for me, the Todd Bowles has fixed the Bucks defense. They were horrendous last year. I mean, they literally cost them multiple games last year. They should have won about 7 last year and only finished with 5 just because of how terrible their defense was and their inability to get stops. And Todd Bowles might even be the biggest difference maker on this team, which is pretty interesting. And he was an under-the-radar add to this coaching staff. He and Bruce Arians worked really well together in Arizona. They go all the way back to Temple, as they showed yesterday in the broadcast, when Arians brought a young DB in named Todd Bowles, and they've been together ever since. But Todd Bowles seems like the kind of guy who maybe not be fit to be a head coach, but he's an outstanding defensive coordinator. And last night some of the blitzes he was throwing at the Panthers O-line, they literally looked like they had no idea what was going on. And that was without their first-round pick last year, Devin White. at linebacker too. So pretty impressive stuff from the Bucs defense. I'm not sure if it was all Cam or all Bucs. I think it was a little bit of both, but definitely the more interesting side of the ball was when the Panthers had it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Their offense was just bad. There's nothing you can say about it. There were a couple nice plays down the middle to Greg Olsen. Christian McCaffrey was pretty much irrelevant.
That's the scariest thing if you're a Panthers fan is how easily they found a way to negate McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I tweeted it last night. It's pretty depressing watching the Panthers because their O-line is so bad that McCaffrey has to stay in and block so often that it completely negates how skillful a receiver he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you watch the Saints, they throw Kamara out in the slot and out on pass routes all the time because the offensive line can stand up against a 4 or 5 man rush. Whereas, I mean, last night they were struggling with 3 and 4 man rushes all game. And so McCaffrey had to stay in there, and it almost takes away his best skill, which is pretty crazy for a guy who's a dominant runner with the ball.
Mm-hmm.
That he's that's what it says about him as how good a receiver he is that might even be his best skill. And they can't use him correctly because their offensive line is so terrible.
Yeah, it's tough to watch, to be honest.
It's he and Saquon remind me a lot of each other right now. It's just like they don't have enough help, and it's completely ripping us off as NFL fans and fantasy owners because these guys don't have enough help around them. And the running back is probably the most dependent position, maybe even in all of professional sports. I can't really think of a position that it matters more who's around you. Even as a receiver, we see receivers put up numbers with terrible quarterbacks pretty regularly if they're that good. But as a running back, man, if you don't have an offensive line and if the other team doesn't respect your passing game, you're in trouble. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're Christian McCaffrey, LaDainian Tomlinson, Barry Sanders, whoever. Like, you're not breaking off many big plays when everybody is just watching for you and they can't even block you, even if they respected the pass.
Yeah.
So
and their only player that they can hit in the pass game really is their tight end Greg Olsen because that's the only guy they have time to throw to.
Samuel's a really good player.
Yeah, and they have good wide receivers out there like DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel. Those guys are good players. Chris Hogan, Super Bowl champion,
former lacrosse player.
Guy. Yep. Legend, Bill Belichick's favorite type of guy. But like they have good playmakers out there, but it's sad because their offensive line really they can't hold for very long. They can't get what they need up there. It's really gonna hurt their team long term, and that's really what's hurt Cam's career. Those hard hits he's taken. He's put himself in a lot of bad situations, to be fair. But I remember back when he was young, he was so exciting, and he just looks like a shell of himself at this point.
Well, one of my favorite NFL media personalities, former scout, kind of the head draft guy at the NFL Network, Daniel Jeremiah, tweeted, "It's really weird watching Cam Newton play where he doesn't run the ball ever," because that was such a huge part of his game. And I think the moment that defined how Cam is not Cam right now is 4th and 1 at the goal line, and they run a direct snap to McCaffrey on a sweep. I've watched a lot of Cam Newton football being an NFC South fan, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that for 98% of Cam's career until now, that would have been a read option where Cam would have kept it and lowered his shoulder on somebody. Mm-hmm. And so to see them motion him out like that was completely bizarre and tells you exactly what Ron Rivera, Norv Turner, and the rest of the Panthers coaching staff thinks about where Cam is physically right now. Because if Cam is healthy right now, that's the last play of the game. Like, I understand in the first quarter, maybe, if you're trying to save him and he's not feeling his best or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, this is the last play of the game here. Like, you put the ball in Cam's hands and you make him read the end, and if the end is with him, then he gives it to McCaffrey, and if not, he takes it. But it tells you a lot about what the coaching staff thinks about him that it's pretty clear that they unanimously think McCaffrey is their best player if that's the play they're running when it matters most. Because every team has that one play. Every team has that one play where they're like, we need a yard. And so you can really tell who their best player is when that's what they need. If you need one yard, who are you going to, right?
Yeah.
And so
Cam got his persona super.
Yeah.
I mean, jumping over, reaching his hand out over the
exactly
with the ball, and then taking that, like not doing that. My jaw was on the floor watching that live. I was so shocked. I was so confused what they did there, and it seemed wrong for the team that's done the same thing for what seemed like forever now.
I know when the Bucks got that delayed game penalty, I was like, okay, whatever. Jameis is gonna have 2 timeouts. They're gonna score a touchdown here. Cam's gonna run it right up the middle. Mm-hmm. And so when they motioned him out, I was, man, first thought was Philly special here because McCaffrey can throw. Yeah. But then when McCaffrey tried to get the edge on the far side, and he got stuffed, I was like, good. You guys deserve to get stuffed for running a fancy little play like that when all you need is half a yard. Like, just take it up the middle with your 6'6", 280-pound quarterback who no one can tackle. Like,
yeah, he may as well be a tight end.
This isn't that hard, but yeah, sometimes NFL coaches just overthink it, I guess. Yeah. And that was a pretty good example. And maybe overthinking and also what they think of their franchise quarterback.
Yeah,
but
and I think something that's really interesting about the game was my note for it I had was Battle of the Heisman winners, and Jameis Winston I never thought would win that. I mean, he looked way better than Cam did. They both threw a couple balls that were dropped as interceptions, which were awful. Neither of them particularly looked good, but I mean, Jameis Winston, he got picked up in his 5th year. He's playing for that contract now.
He's playing for his career in the NFL.
Yeah, and he's looking a bit better than he did, I think, last week at least. So yeah, that's good for him. Just a small little note on that.
Jameis was fine, and so I don't know if as a Bucs fan you're feeling good that maybe the best you can get out of Jameis is fine. But I think the big positive if you're a Bucs fan is it's pretty clear this roster is extremely improved, especially on defense. And so if Jameis is done and they move on from Jameis, either way, there's a lot more talent down in Tampa. And in the next year or so, I think Bruce is going to find a way to get that team around a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Just because it's pretty clear they have way more talent. And so either it's going to be with Jameis or it's going to be with someone from the draft. It's one or the other at this point.
Yeah,
but
it's good quarterback.